Ignore the out of tune, I'll go tune it. That should be alright.
Get home and go, are you thinking up the back? You might get another little feeling. I would like one. Yeah, it would be. One day. Sometimes they just walk in. Yeah. People jump out there and shit it straight. It happens, yeah. But I know how much work he wants.
is Mary Moroney, and I'm the current chair of Avatar's Abode, who are charged with maintaining this property, dedicated to Maya Barber. The Australian poet Francis Brabazon found this property, a disused pineapple farm, in 1958. It was made ready for Barber's visit in June of that year, and it was during this visit that Maya Barber gave the property the name Avatar's Abode. Avatar's Abode holds a deep significance for David, Gusi and the family, and it's why they've chosen to gather here to remember Gusi today. On behalf of the Avatar's Abode Trust, I'd like to welcome you all. I'll just run through a few little housekeeping things. For those of you who haven't been here, there are some toilets just up the path. And there's water available on the table outside. Please avail yourself of that. Immediately after the service, the family will spend some time privately in Barber's house. And we ask you to respect that. And then afterwards, you're welcome to go up and visit. I'd also like to mention how thankful the Trust are for Gusi. Gusi contributed so much to Avatar's Abode and all who visit. Many of us enjoyed her delicious lunches. A few years ago, we used to gather regularly to have a community lunch, and it was a time to gather, converse, and eat. It was wonderful. Gusi and David, for many years, spent several months living in India at Maribad, and it was during this time that they were introduced to archiving. Both worked at the Manzil-e-Meher archive facility, learning skills that they then brought back here to Avatar's Abode. Gusi has worked meticulously, processing photographs, scanning, recording as much detail as possible, identifying every person in the photo, recording where the photo was taken and when. Gusi has also been instrumental in recording the provenance of many of the precious items housed in the collection here at Avatar's Abode. Her generosity of time and energy, attention to detail, and willingness to discover as much information about something has not gone unnoticed. Thank you, Gusi, and thank you, Barber, for giving us Gusi.
Thank you for joining us today to celebrate the life of Gusi Carpenter, also known as Marion Veronica, Gusi, Gussie, Guspus, and best of all, Pussy Fart Bender. The name Gusi started out as a nickname, Augustine, then was shortened to Gusti and then Gusi. It was such a unique name that it often needed explaining. At Morgan's wedding, the celebrant asked Mum for her name so that he could introduce her, and, deadpan, she replied, Gusi, it rhymes with pussy, before striding on stage. We hope that you will leave here today remembering her wicked sense of humour, but also her unconditional support for her family, her fearlessness when faced with adversity, and her unwavering commitment to God. We'll start with a slideshow accompanied by Open Up the Door by Buzz Connor. And if you don't mind giving us a minute, we're having some technical issues, so we'll be with you as soon as we can.
Thanks, guys. Jim. All right. So we would now like to invite Mum's youngest brother, Stuart Carpenter, up onto the stage. You ready, Stuart? So it's turns out it's no coincidence that Stuart ended up here on the Sunshine Coast for a series of cricket matches playing for the over 60s for Wales, who came 6th in the world. 5th. I thought Mum would have appreciated that slip. And he was supposed to be here in 2020, but it just ended up that he's here now, which worked out perfectly. I wonder how that happened, hey? So come on up, Stuart.
This is going to be quite hard. Bear with me. As Owen said, I feel really lucky and honoured to be here, to represent all our family in England and Wales and various other countries around the world. Cousins, endless cousins in Germany, France, where Mook's family are, her daughter in the West Indies, our cousins in Canada, and Chief's daughter and family in Switzerland, where I think Chief and Jenny are at the moment. Really lucky to have Gus as a big sister. I call her Gus. I don't know where the extra I came in, but she's always been Gus to me. Big sister, big character, and one I'm sure that all of you here will, as I do, feel really lucky and proud to have known. It's really poignant, I thought, the other day. David took Jane and I up to the rainforest, to the Mary Cairncross gardens and park and things, and walking through there, it was absolutely fantastic. The trees are just vast, and if you haven't been, I'm sure you have, but if you haven't been, go and have a look. I mean, there was just the most wonderful trees, and apparently it was one of Gus's favourite places. But I just thought it was really poignant that when you could see there was one place where one of these massive trees had fallen, and the devastation that had caused through the forest was just extraordinary. But then you walk on a little bit further and you see that the forest's regenerating really quickly. And just hope that sort of conjures a bit of a picture for people of hopefully what will happen in time. So Gus grew up in Great Bursted in Essex. Some pictures there of the old family house in Billericay. She was the second of 5 of us. It took them 5 goes to get it right. And as you probably appreciate, we've all got really silly nicknames. Although with me, they tended to leave the... Gus was the only one who really had a nickname for me. Blossom used to call me Butts for some bizarre reason. Blossom's our mother. But Gus nicknamed me Higgins. And so other than in Tasmania, I'm called Stuart, but here I'm with you lot, I'm Higgins. But growing up, there were loads of laughs. Have you seen from all of those pictures? She did spend quite a lot of time laughing, lots of fun, lots of games, saw a bit of table tennis. She was also pretty good at tennis as well. We used to go to AJ's and Nana's next door to play tennis a lot, and when I wasn't playing tennis I was playing cricket, and it seems to have worked a bit. So we had a great upbringing and a really loving and happy home, and parents who would do anything for you. And Gus obviously was very much like her father, Geoffrey, both in stature and her sense of humour. She loved jokes, he loved jokes, and the ability they both had to fill a room with joy was pretty unique, and even over the silliest things. Gus's laughter around Monty Python jokes was just ridiculous, and I remember one train journey, which there was a picture of in your house, references to the most stupid things, and just people in the carriage having no idea what we were talking about, but it was hilarious to us. Later in his life, Father, GOC, as she I think called him, used to love coming to Australia, particularly to watch his beloved England play cricket here, not always with a great deal of success, I'm disappointed to say. But one story he came back with was that Gus's car was apparently seen driving around Hobart, and they were a bit concerned because it didn't appear to have anyone behind the wheel, and something to do with the shortness of her back, and she used to drive and like this. My brother P also had a story about a car. His is perhaps a little more unexciting. He said he thought it was really kind that Gus picked him up from an airport. That was about all he had to say. But I think that also related to a time when she was following a cattle truck, and one of the dear beasts inside had a rather serious case of diarrhea, which ended up on the windscreen of Gus's car. So yes, there was. I'm sure there was a lot more to P's story, and perhaps something that he couldn't find easy to sort of get across. But Chief was a bit more lucid, also known as Goody Two Shoes. Perhaps not so much as more so than Gus. And he said that Gus was a bit of a handful as a teenager. I've written here, it must be hereditary, looking around to see where Margaret is. And apparently she had a big bust-up with Blossom, which resulted in physical abuse. I don't know which way, but yes, they had an interesting relationship. But most of the time it was fantastic. Chief also said that there was one night, bonfire night, the 5th of November was a big thing with us. We used to build the most massive bonfire through the autumn, and invited all the local kids around. And one cold wet night, this enormous rocket went up, to which Gus leant back, fell straight into the horse trough, got completely soaked, but then got up and carried on as if nothing had happened. So she was a good one for carrying on, good one for enjoying a laugh, even if it was at her expense. There was a story came back from our cousins in Germany, where Gus used to go to the interminable family gatherings. Most of the time I managed to duck them, but she used to lighten the load, and one time she went wearing quite aptly a Queen Elizabeth II mask, which she wore for the entire occasion, accompanied by a swimming hat. The Germans, who perhaps don't have the same sense of humour as the British, didn't really understand what was going on. But maybe the significance of Gus passing the day after Queen Elizabeth was there before we all knew it was going to be. As I say, Chief was more happy to be dragged around those events than I was. So I was pleased to be young enough to duck them. But Gus and Chief travelled quite extensively through Europe, quite often hitchhiking, and for the younger people in the audience, that's a way of stealing a lift in a car with other people. It doesn't always work very well. I travelled around Australia with Jane's brother, Jeremy, we tried hitchhiking. There's a place called Hay, somewhere in the middle of nowhere, that we spent about 48 hours trying to catch a lift. Chief and Gus had a similar experience in Paris, trying to get a lift down to Macon, and the only time it worked for them to get a lift was when they hid Chief in a bush. Maybe it was his similarity in looks to Jesus that meant that the person wouldn't appear. But again, I'm sure they had lots of laughs. And he also said that on one trip they managed to get a lift in an open-top Mercedes, and it was his first experience of travelling 220 kilometres an hour in a car. I'm quite a bit younger than Gus, as you're probably aware. So my first real memories were of her reading stories to me. She was great at coming home from school and happy to sit me on her knee and read my favourite books to me, but also playing tennis at AJ's with Chief and Jill. Auntie Jill was a very keen tennis player and keen Wimbledon goer. So and Nana's house, which was right next door, was always a good source of more fun and more cake as well. I spent quite a bit of time with Gus in Hobart. The first time I went there with Jane's brother Jeremy, and I know the story was regaled last night of Hazel, but I'm going to tell you the proper version. Jeremy and I were staying in Battery Point with Gus, and Hazel had a propensity to sleepwalk, so we took it on ourselves to sleep under the table because we thought it was a bit dangerous to let her stomp around on top of us in the night. But Gus and Bruce, oh, by the way, Bruce, in case you don't know, is sitting in the front here. Another reference to Monty Python. David Bowling, a.k.a. Bruce, came to live back with us in England at 134. And again, we just had such a laugh. Perhaps a little bit non-PC, but Bruce sort of came back and said, "Oh, what's it taste like?" I said, "Well, I don't know, I've never eaten one." They're foxes. So we said, well, give it a go. So we took this poor baby fox back, chopped its bag leg off and fried it. Gus was horrified. The whole kitchen smelt of fish for some bizarre reason. But obviously she didn't mind too much because fairly shortly after they got engaged, and I was quite fortunate and got quite a lot of street cred for attending my sister's wedding with The Who singing in the background. Luckily, Gus didn't inherit many of my mother's cooking skills. She was more in terms for volume rather than quality, and endless quantities of boiled potatoes, red grot, and that interminable Christmas salad was hopefully something that we'll all forget. The Jersey cow was quite good for some of the waistlines, and as you can see from my svelte figure, the cow had died by the time I got to youth. But most of them were brought up on a fairly rich diet of fat and carbohydrate. Luckily, Blossom's recipe for stewed apples and lard rests with her in peace. Rather than quality. Didn't seem to worry Bruce too much, though, who always had a healthy appetite. Gus helped me one morning get breakfast ready for him. 36 eggs, pound of sausages, 2 boxes of cereals, 2 loaves of bread, and a sign saying there's more in the pantry if this isn't enough. Blossom made a number of trips to India with Gus and Bruce, and soon in her house, like in Gus's, these pictures started to appear. It was a little bit over my head, but anyway, she seemed to really get something out of it and spent a lot of time there. Father, on the other hand, was more keen to go to Australia and the West Indies and other places to watch England play cricket. But he would have enjoyed being here and spending the last couple of weeks with me supporting the Welsh cricket team. Come on, Wales! In March 2020, Gus and Bruce, it was the week before COVID hit, so they managed to get out and back to Australia. Otherwise, they might still be there now. But yes, COVID's got a lot to answer for, but that was one of the one of the lucky ones. Finally, there's an old sort of family story, if you like. My father and I used to obviously go and watch quite a lot of cricket, and we used to take this old vicar up to Lord's, and we were driving up there one day, and we got a bit delayed, a bit like Jane and I on the way here. We hit a lot of traffic lights. I always remember Father saying to Reverend Wilkie, "Come on, Wilkie, we're getting a bit late, let's have a few green lights." We had 26 green traffic lights in a row, and this was before traffic light sequencing was even invented. So as I say, the story goes back and has quite a lot of poignancy, because after Father died, Blossom said to me that she had a dream about seeing him about a week after he died, and his face was very grey and he just looked really unhappy, she said. And then a week later, she had another dream and saw him, and he came up and said that the lights are green. So read into that what you will. Let's hope the lights are green for Gus. That's all I can say for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. It's really encouraging to see that talking and talking and talking and talking runs in the family. Next up, we have a dear friend of Mum's, Joanne Bruford.
Bernard and I first met Gusi in the early 70s. She was staying here on Avatar's Abode after coming back from her first visit to India. Bernard's mother, Joan, had met her in India and invited her for afternoon tea. She was single then, of course, a sweet young teacher from Hobart. Our contact after that was intermittent. We remember visiting Gusi and David and Margaret, Owen and Morgan when they were living in Hobart. We had Joan with us. Gusi was pregnant with Lizzie. A beautiful sun-filled room on a very cold Tasmania winter's day. Our friendship with David and Gusi really developed after they moved to Nambour. In David, she had met a wonderful partner in life. They worked side by side towards their common goals in life, with easy goals. Use the image of oxen pulling together, equally yoked, following the path they had chosen together. When we recall our times with Gusi and David, we think of good company, good food, good conversation, and much laughter. This extended beyond their personal friendship circle, coming together to share a meal that has been prepared with love and spiritual tradition, breaking bread together. People who have been lingering around the edges of moved up a notch when she asked me to help her prepare the fortnightly community lunches here at Avatar's Abode. In carrying out this idea, she had our old friend Robert Rouse in mind. He was living alone after looking after his beautiful wife Lorna for many years. Gusi noticed when people needed encouragement to draw nearer to the campfire. Gusi's concerns went beyond her friendship circle, beyond the Mayababa community. Gusi and David were committed to social justice, which they worked towards in their professional lives and beyond. They were at one in their concern for the environment. For me, Gusi was a person I could talk about ideas with, debate with, exchange book recommendations with, touch upon the deeply personal with. We shared what was sometimes a coarse sense of humour. No other friend quite like life friend Gusi. Then for so long, Gusi and David and the children and grandchildren and their friends really made the most of the time she had. So much love and joy and laughter amongst the tears. The world is different because of Gusi. She will not be forgotten. Her close ones will continue along their paths in life, still influenced by what they learned from Gusi. I'll miss her a great deal.
Joanne. Mum and I and put together a list of songs for her funeral. As we listened to a song called We Should Always Be Together, I could see it transported her spirit to a divine place. I hope it makes your soul sing the way it did Mum's. Sage is coming up now. Bit of pressure.
I don't wanna go. I wanna stay with you forever. Hold me in your arms. Let me feel your beating heart. We should always be together. I don't want to leave you, even for a minute. I couldn't stand to live my life a single day without you in it. They say that time heals all wounds, but I can't wait for later. Anyway, I'm afraid if I walk away this time it could be fatal. I don't wanna go. You have to drag me off in chains. Don't leave me in the dark. Don't let me drift too far. You know I couldn't stand the pain. I don't want you to be just another memory that keeps me awake at night, keeps me trying to hold on to, trying to get you back into my life. I don't want to go. I want to stay with you forever. Hold me in your arms. Let me feel your beating heart. We should always be together. I don't want to go. I want to stay with you forever. Hold me in your arms. Let me feel your beating heart. We should always be together. Yeah, we should always, always be together. Yeah, we should always, always be together.
Mum had actually specifically asked for Sage to come and sing today, so it was really special. Thank you, Sage. Next we have Hazel Scholar. Hazel told us yesterday that as she was waiting in the airport to fly up here, she and Peter calculated that she had known Mum for 44 years. This was just as they were arriving at gate 44 for a flight where the two of them were seated next to each other in row 22. It definitely would have tickled Mum. Hazel was there when I was born, and she and Peter have become like a second family to Lizzie, so we're really honoured to have her speaking today.
I'd like to begin by thanking David and his family for giving me this opportunity to speak today. Gusi was a woman of many parts. She was my dear friend. She was a mentor to me. I looked to her as a committed citizen of the world. I looked up to her. I respected her as a woman of faith, and of course, all of the time I have known Gusi, she has been David's partner in life, and a wonderful mother to Margaret, Morgan, Owen and Lizzie, and a fun-loving grandmother to all of her grandchildren who had a wicked sense of humour. Over the 44 years that Gusi has been in my life, I have valued her unflinching honesty, her commitment to integrity and social justice, her willingness to hold me and others to account when she felt it necessary, and her extraordinary capacity to express strongly held views on virtually any subject. All of this delivered in her inimitable style, built on her phenomenal presence and her acute understanding of the world. My memories of Gusi are filled with stimulating conversations about politics, social work, food, cooking, gardening, and her love of nature and her concerns for our environment. Sometimes these conversations were over long dinners with family and friends, and sometimes just the two of us having an armchair chat over a cup of tea. They were always accompanied by laughter at the absurdity of the world and often ourselves. As I've already said, I've known Gusi for over 44 years, and over that time, she and David have brought 4 wonderful children into the world. They travelled widely, established homes in both Australia and India, and wherever they went together, they became central to the communities in which they lived. They have been an incredible partnership. Over these last few months, their partnership has been deeply honoured by David, by Gusi and David's children and their grandchildren, and by many members of this community. You have been at her side on this most difficult of journeys, and I know your love and support for her was the greatest gift Gusi could have received at this time in her life. The other day I was speaking with an old friend, Steve Sando. Steve spent time with us in India in 1978. He shared his thoughts about Gusi with me. One of the things he said was, "I'm truly better for having known her." And I think that applies to all of us today. We are all better people for having had Gusi in our lives.
It's true, Hazel, and it's demonstrated by how many people are here today and how many people have travelled from interstate and how much work it is to set up a funeral for a very popular person. Next up, we have Rob Blair, who'll play an acoustic version of Begin the Begin. If you don't know the song, the second verse goes, "I'm with you once more under the stars, and down by the shore an orchestra's playing, and even the palms seem to be swaying when they begin the begin." I hope that as Rob plays for you, our Begin the Begin themed stage takes you to a night of tropical splendour.
The largest audience I've had for years. They didn't tell me this. Begin to Begin is a popular send-off tune for in the barber circle.
So I'm going to speak to you on behalf of Morgan, Owen and Lizzie, and the grandchildren are going to come up here and say a few words as well. I can't promise they'll be all polite. If I could choose a few short words to sum Mum up, it would be a bringer of good cheer. As I looked back at the photos of our lives together, I saw three things: family, food, and fun. And when I was woken in the night by an automated voice saying, "Warning, kitchen battery low," a few days from the end, I couldn't help but wonder if it was a message from the other side. The kitchen was always the heart of our home, and Mum was always at the centre of it. A place to share what she called God sip over cups of tea and slices of cake. In the spirit of family, the grandchildren are going to share some stories. So firstly, I'd like to ask Sophie and Oscar to come up.
So Sophie and Oscar have written a little story about Grandma, which I will read. This is Sophie's story. Grandma Gusi always gave me big hugs. She was kind and she was very funny. She was very funny. Sometimes I made her laugh by pulling silly faces. I love Grandma Gusi and I'm glad to have her on my team. Here are 6 things I loved about my grandma. I loved when she... Yeah, you do it.
I loved when she read me Magic Monkey and did different voices for all of the characters. I loved when she would do this funny knee-bouncing song thing and drop me on one. I loved when Gusi gave me giant hugs. She was very good at giant hugs. I loved when Grandma went out in the garden with me to pick tomatoes and strawberries. I loved when she played water fights with me. I loved when Grandma took me to the chickens. I love Grandma for all these reasons and more. Grandma Gusi was amazing, and she always will be. And Oscar also wrote a story. He said, "You ready? Do you want to read some of it?" No? Okay. Grandma had blue eyes and she had a very good laugh. She made me laugh when she bounced me on her knees and sang "Hopper Hopper Reiter." I liked coming to Grandma's house and seeing the chickens and also playing water fights with Grandma. We picked strawberries in the garden and it made me happy when Grandma Gusi was alive. Thank you. Okay. And now, Morgan, I'm going to get you to come up with the 3 little rascals. the 3 little sausages, the 3 little chickens.
That what?
Is it on? Oh.
Reese, you can do that one.
Okay.
So, as you will all be probably quite acutely aware, Mum, Gusi, Granny to my kids, even though she hated it and called them funny names in return, had a wonderful sense of humour. And as you'll probably be quite aware, dirty and rude jokes seem to be the ones that she enjoyed the most. So we've put together a few jokes that we enjoyed with her over the years. So yes, Reese is going to start with... These are the jokes that we shared with Mum that she found funny, and also some that she told us.
The other day I was pulled over by a cop. He walked up to my window and said papers. I'd said scissors. I win, and drove off. I think he wants a rematch because he's still chasing me. What's the difference between snowmen and snowwomen? Snowballs. This is a 3-part joke. Why did the koala fall out of the tree? Because it was dead. Why did the second koala fall out of the tree? Because it was hit by the first one. Why did the third koala fall out of the tree? Because it thought it was a game and wanted to join in.
Mum also really liked making up silly book names with my kids. She'd sit there and they'd cackle as they made up silly names together. So Reese is going to start and Jake's got a couple.
In a Puddle by IP Standing. Missed the Dunny by MT Bowl.
And the next one.
Rusty Bed Springs by IP Knightley. And Rush for the Toilet by I Need a Go. Illustrated by Willie Make It. And published by Andy Didn't. Is that it?
So Mum sent us some jokes middle of December last year, some Christmas themed jokes, and some of the ones that we both found quite entertaining. Jake's going to read a couple out for us.
Okay. Why did the Scarecrow get a Christmas bonus? He was outstanding in his field. What did one snowman say to the other? Is it just me, or do you smell carrots? Did you hear about the man who stole an advent calendar? He got 25 days.
And some old jokes which still go around the family from time to time. What do you call a deer with no eyes? No idea. What do you call a deer with no eyes and no legs? Still no idea. And one which Miles shared with Mum on a poster which some of you may have seen recently. Why did the cookie go to the hospital? He was feeling crummy. And as Mum would probably have said, life is like diarrhoea. No matter how much you want to, you just can't stop the shit from happening. Thank you all very much for your support and love of my mother, and Jay Barber.
So Mum's actually being cremated today, so I thought I'd share one last joke, which she would have particularly loved. Being cremated is my last hope for a smoking hot body. Of course, none of the family would be here to share terrible jokes with you if Mum hadn't met Dad. She told me she had admired his legs, which was oddly ironic given that our grandfather had also fallen in love with Granny Blossom for her legs. And Dad's legs remained a talking point when he turned up in Mum's childhood home of Billericay wearing typically short Australian shorts and Tasmanian woolly hiking socks. Mum opened our eyes to the world through travel, political debate, and she instilled a sense of justice and equality in us that was truly ahead of its time. We were encouraged to be exactly who we wanted to be. At the heart of everything, was Mum's deep faith in God. It wasn't something she ever spoke of with evangelical fervour, although when I threatened to row across the Pacific Ocean with two men, she certainly prayed for divine intervention. But it underpinned everything. It was her North Star, and it burned bright. Whenever you were around her, you could feel its warmth. It instilled in her a deep sense of duty to her friends, to her family, and ultimately to God. As we venture into the unknown without Mum in our lives, I am reminded of the biblical stories about venturing into the desert. And I think back to a card Dad gave me on my first ocean row, where he talked about the lonely road of the seeker, and how, as the outer journey settles into a rhythm, the inner journey begins to intensify. Death affords us an opportunity to step into the desert, to settle into a new rhythm, and to intensify our inner journeys. May we face the road ahead with the same good cheer that Mum would have. I'd like to invite Dad up to give his talk.
Well, what a fantastic gathering to celebrate Gusi's life, and I wanted to thank all of you for coming. Particularly want to thank my brother John. Don't hide, stand over here, John. Who was always John-O to me. And Gusi's brother Stuart and his partner Jane from Wales, our dear friends Hazel and Peter, Mayrose and Stuart, their two boys Rumi and Mingus, and Katie and Montana and Sage and Lucy, Tricia and Strider, all who've come from interstate to be with us. And I want to thank the wonderful team of people who loved, nurtured and supported Gusi through the past 6 months, and who in so many ways reached out to support me, Lizzie, Margaret, Morgan and Owen and our 5 grandchildren. And all those people overseas and interstate who through their flowers, emails, letters, text messages, WhatsApp and FaceTime calls gave Gusi support and love. I especially want to thank our 4 children who've all been unstinting in their support over the past 6 months. And I wanted to thank Morgan's wife Michelle and Owen's wife Jamie and Jamie's mum and dad Peter and Carol, who did so much to support us and were there in the background keeping the family life running. We really came to appreciate what it means to be part of a faith community as people touched by Gusi's love of life and her unwavering commitment to building community repaid her generosity of spirit with such unconditional love. When we were married at Maya Barbara Oceanic in London in 1977, Delia de Leon, a close disciple of Maya Barbara since the early 1930s, read from one of Maya Barbara's discourses at our wedding on the sanctification of married life. Her reading included the following: There are immense spiritual possibilities in married life when it is thoroughly determined by the vision of truth. It has to be undertaken as a partnership in a spiritual adventure intended to discover what life can be at its best, an exploration of the higher possibilities of the spirit. If it's inspired by a lofty idealism, it can become a comradeship which requires and calls forth increasingly greater sacrifices from each other and becomes the means by which 2 souls can offer their united love and service to the whole family of humanity. It proved to be a wonderful foundation for us to build our life together. I wanted to particularly thank John and Lucy for dressing the stage with help from Primrose and Ollie and Ella. And when Rob was playing Begin the Begin, when Jono happened to be at Maya Barbara Oceanic in the Christmas of 1977 and they were putting on a Christmas play, Jono's job, because he'd been a set designer, was to construct a set for the Begin song. So it was good practice 45 years ago, Jono, and you've done a wonderful job. Thank you. Gusi's life can be seen as a grand spiritual adventure in which she continually sought to discover what life at its best can be. Her life was imbued with a steadfast commitment to the service of others, and this was particularly evident in her work as a social worker for nearly 40 years. She took to heart Barbara's message that real happiness lies in making others happy. She had a great sense of humour, and you always knew she was around by her infectious laugh. In her story that's now online, she talked about staying at the Dowlad Hotel in Ahmednagar in the 1970s with Sheila Krinsky and how they just laughed and laughed and laughed. In 2006, when we started living in India for half of each year, she became deeply involved in the cataloguing of the photographs that Mara referred to. And she became completely absorbed in looking at images of Barbara and developed this amazing knowledge of the people from the 1920s on. This is what will be her lasting legacy for the future followers of Maya Barbara, as they are able to learn of his life and work through these images, which number over 15,000. And an unexpected gift from the COVID pandemic was that Gusi and I were able to spend the last 2 years of her life working side by side, mostly Monday to Friday, up here at Avatar's Abode in the archives, doing what we both loved. Born in Essex, settled in Hobart in 71, and she came and worked as a primary school teacher. And it was in Hobart that she first heard about Maya Barbara. She went alone to India in 1972 to visit his tomb shrine at Mehrabad and met his close disciples at nearby Mehrabad. She instantly felt she'd found her true home when she was met immediately on her arrival by Baba's sister Mani, who warmly embraced her and said, "Welcome home." And so began a 50-year love affair that would take her back to India over 30 times. In 1976, after she finished training as a social worker, which I was also doing, I travelled with her to Mehrabad and was deeply touched by her devotion and spiritual longing. As you know, she was never backward in coming forward, and she called a spade a spade. And some found it a bit confronting, but you were rarely in doubt as to her opinion on things. In 1977, she was back in Tasmania. I was in the UK, and she wrote me a letter suggesting it'd be a good idea if we got married, and I willingly accepted her proposal. I think she got tired of waiting. We returned from the UK to Hobart in 78 and started a family, and you've met them all today. In 1995, we all went to India as a family for the first time, and Gusi's mother, Margaret, or Blossom, who'd by then become a devout follower of Meher Baba, joined us in India. Gusi developed a deep connection with some of the old disciples known as Baba's Mandali, and they became her guides and mentors. Mansari, a female disciple who lived beside Meher Baba's tomb at Mehrabad, used to call her Punchy. She always put her fist up when she met her. And she would tease Gusi by saying she called her Punchy because in her next life she was going to be born as a poor child in Panchgani, a hill station that Baba often visited. She had a great sense of fun. Gusi and I hosted Meru and then Katie, two of the women Mandali, in our home in Hobart. And Gusi loved having the opportunity to serve these two amazing women. And what fun she and Katie had in the kitchen and at the markets buying food. After Katie's visit, she would sometimes take Gusi to the kitchen at Mehrabad, sneak her out the back and let her sample some of the food that she was preparing for the other women Mandali. And she'd share recipes with Gusi of the food that Baba liked. What a privilege that was. Over the decades, she developed and maintained deep friendships with people around the world, and I know many of them are watching this service today. She was constantly involved in projects at home, whether it was in the garden, cooking, making preserves and jams, making clothes for herself and the children, spinning and knitting wool for garments, or entertaining the stream of visitors who seemed to come through our front and back door to avail themselves of her abundant hospitality. Gusi had a great sense of fun, and in her last months she'd delight in having water pistol fights with the grandchildren from the comfort of a wheelchair on the veranda, where she could squirt them in the garden. Many here will remember her love of cooking, and Joanne spoke movingly about the 5 years that they cooked lunches together here for up to 30 people. She was an accomplished spinner and veteran knitter, and she was so thrilled that she was able to gift her spinning wheel to Nadia Keating, to continue this tradition. She was also an accomplished singer and loved nothing more than attending the weekend gospel singing workshops run by Tony Backhouse, and we went to the last one in May for her birthday. In the last few years at Mehrabad, we sang gospel songs weekly with a small group, and today we're going to hear one of those songs sung by our friends Kristen and Charlie in Maine. Gusi loved gardening both here and in India, and her garden always gave her much pleasure and of course provided us with constant vegetables and flowers. And her love of flowers can be seen here today, and she would have loved to see this beautiful display. In 2010 in India, Gusi and another mature Western woman set up a household recycling program, and I remember the look of surprise from many of the villagers when they saw two mature Western women sorting out garbage and loading it onto the back of a small truck every couple of weeks as they went around Mehrabad on Saturday mornings. Just this year, the village have started their own recycling program, and Gusi always believed that you needed to be the change that you wanted. Her love of good food and the conviviality of sharing delicious home-cooked meals with friends was a hallmark of her life. Her love for her family and her dedication to serve others touched the lives of many. A dear friend of mine from Tasmania summed her up in this way: "I'll never forget walking into Gusi's presence and encountering her humour and frank assessments, those disarming instruments of her conversation, her impatience with insincerity, dissimulation or pretense, and her unfailing rapier wit always on hand to dispel them, her indomitable courage, heart and humour, her tough love and grounded wisdom. A couple of months ago, Gusi asked our friend Jeannie to come and help colour her hair purple. She said she wanted to go out in a blaze of colour. It was vintage Gusi and typical of her attitude to life, that it is to be lived to the full. How fortunate I am that I can share this celebration of her life with you all. Her love for God was unwavering, and her life was an inspiring example of love in service. Her love for her family and her friends is the transformative legacy of her life, and we are here today to celebrate with joy and gratitude a life well lived.
We've got a slideshow coming up, so I need some help opening the curtain.
Lay down, my dear sister, lay down and take your rest. Won't you lay your head down on your Savior's breast? I love you, oh Papa loves you the best, and I bid you good night, good night, good night. Oh, I bid you good night, good night, good night. Lay down, my dear brother, lay down and take your rest. Won't you lay your head down on your Savior's breast? I love you, oh, my Papa loves you the best, and I bid you good night, good night, good night. Oh, I bid you good night, good night, good night. Lay down, my dear mother, lay down and take your rest. Won't you lay your head down on your Savior's breast? I love you, oh, my Papa loves you the best, and I bid you good night, good night, good night. Oh, I bid you good night, good night. He's your real father and your real mother. I bid you good night, good night. He's the ocean of love, the ocean of love. I bid you good night, good night. He's the highest of the high, the King of kings. I bid you good night, good night, good night. Lay down, my dear Father, lay down and take your rest. Won't you lay your head down on your Savior's breast? I love you, oh, but Papa loves you the best. Oh, bid you good night, good night, sister, lay down and take your rest. Won't you lay your head down on your Savior's breast? I love you, oh, but Papa loves you the best. And I bid you good night, good night, good night. Oh, I bid you good night, good night, good night. Lay down, my dear brother, lay down and take your rest. Won't you lay your head down on your Savior's breast? I love you, oh, but Papa loves you the best, and I bid you good night, good night, good night. Oh, I bid you good night, good night, good night. Lay down, my dear mother.
So if you'd all like to turn over your order of service, you'll find two prayers. The first is spoken and the second is sung. You're welcome to sit or stand, stay in the room. Whatever you like, Mum wouldn't mind.
Eternal ancient one, your face is a bright transcendental sun. Lighten this dark world and the tears I weep. But may hair I give to you to keep. Creator, yet creationless you are. Body divine avatar, who through compassion the three worlds maintains, destroy this ignorance that life sustains. These five lights are the whirling spokes of breath, of the world's wheel that bears me unto death. Unless you who are infinitely kind, with the wheels of which is conditioned mind. This incense is my love, these fruits my art, which should please you I have shaped from my heart. Accept them as you would a simple flower that has no use beyond its shining out. You are myself, I sing to you in praise, and beg your love to bear me through the days, till you, the ever-living perfect one, illume my darkness with your shining sun.
thanks to the friends and family all over the world who have joined virtually. Peace be with you. Time to depart with Baba.
Hi Francis, did it all go well?